Today we have joining us an InfoSec veteran with over 25 years of experience in the trenches, someone who, as they would describe, has been around the block for quite a while, someone who has had a number of experiences, and currently he is the CEO and founder of Opswright. So Tony, welcome to CyberJA.
Thanks. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm interested to kind of get into the conversation and see where this takes us.
Sure, definitely. I look forward to it as well. Now, Tony, your career spans a number of job roles, which no doubt has provided you with a significant amount of experiences. And for sure, like myself, and also upcoming cybersecurity or InfoSec professionals, we are always curious, to hear the stories of professionals like yourself in terms of how it is that your journey actually reached to where it actually got to at this point in time. And can you share with us about yourself and how it is that your journey actually started? Because that's one of the main things that persons who are trying to get into the industry, how it is that I actually start, what are the experiences like, what are the skill set that I need. The persons want to hear those challenges, those real experiences, to understand that reality versus what is actually taught on a theoretical basis in schools or whichever institutions. So can you take us along that journey?
Sure. First off, I will say that I followed a very atypical path into cyber. I don't necessarily recommend that people follow my example here, but certainly I can kind of give you a little bit of background on myself and kind of where I came from and how I kind of fell into this. I never intended on a career in technology at all, much less cybersecurity, right? Growing up, I was an avid reader. I love the English language. I love reading. I love literature. I was an English major. I served as a combat correspondent in the United States Marine Corps, which is something closely resembling journalism, but a slight flavor on that when you were writing articles for the government, as you might imagine. And I really kind of start along those lines. And my mother for a while sold computers at Circuit City, which was a big computer retail store here in the US and around the world, 30 years ago or so. And a common trend she would find when she sold people computers is they didn't know how to use them, right? Again, this 30 years ago, no one knew how computers worked, how to use them, even basic stuff, even just the productivity software that shipped with the computer, no one knew how to use that stuff, right? So she would send me on site. It was a little kind of undercover because it wasn't an official service provided by the store, but it was a little side business my mom operated, where I would go in and I would teach people how to use, Lotus Notes or, whatever software was shipping with a computer. And then fast forward when I got into college, like I said, I was an English major, starving college kid, just need a little bit of money for, a 6-pack of beer for the weekend. And so I would build websites for people in college for a little beer money. Again, not serious stuff. This is, back in the days of these terrible GeoCities websites where you would just steal somebody else's HTML and modify it. Nothing too terribly sophisticated. It was really kind of my foray into technology. And, as time went along, I found that I just kind of naturally gravitated towards technology-based roles and, kind of found myself without a technology degree, but working in IT. I did that for a number of years. And really what kind of predicated my launch of my cybersecurity career is something that I tell people a lot. Anytime you are thinking about any kind of organizational change, even personal change, even, things like I want to drink less, I want to stop smoking, I want to stop whatever I'm trying to change in my life, usually pain is what predicates change, right? Some sort of consequence, some sort of negative event that caused that. And for me, that was SQL Slammer. He was working in IT, was doing desktop support and a little bit of server support back in those days. And dealing with SQL Slammer generated so much pain for me, destroyed my weekend and wound up working nights. And I was like, man, this is terrible. Like, why is our infrastructure in such a sad state of affairs that this kind of event could just destroy our lives, right? It was terribly impactful. And it kind of opened my eyes to just the huge gaps that we have in our security. And I never really thought about it. I mean, I dabbled in this stuff, I might have played with some wares back in the day and, played around with some video games and, downloading stuff. It was kind of the thing that everyone that was in technology back in those days, back before we really had rules around what was allowed and what was not allowed, we all kind of dabbled in these kinds of things, but it wasn't something that I seriously considered as a career path until that point. And, I was working in a standard IT job. There were no security roles at the time that I was aware of. And so it really kind of turned into the situation where I started providing education and awareness to my fellow systems administrators and IT workers. We had an internal worked in state government at the time for Department of Health within the state of Florida. And we had a very large email distribution list with all the system administrators on it. And, questions would come up, issues would come up. And I just started on the path of education. And it was really kind of a way to build my personal brand within the state government agency, as well as learn myself, right? Because I found myself, as these things come up, I was teaching myself at the same time that I was coming up with concepts to convey and improve the lives of my fellow administrators. And before long, I developed a reputation inside the organization as somebody that knows something about cybersecurity. And so when an opportunity came up inside the organization, I was a natural fit.
Awesome. That's also very interesting when I actually listen to there are a number of bits and pieces of how you've actually started that is somewhat similar based on where I've actually started from. It has not always been an interest or a love for technology or information security. As a matter of fact, back then, there wasn't a thing such as information or cybersecurity per se. So for me, I know I had an interest for the technical stuff. I mean, it was always been, architecture. I actually did a number of, as it relates to my career along that path. But for some reason, the opportunity presented itself. Back when I was actually applying to making my decision leaving high school into university. And it so happened that I was accepted into a college that actually did back then a bachelor's in management information system. And that is where my focus actually shifted right into IT, something that I never really had much interest in. And here I am today. So I was kind of smiling as you mentioned those very important points in terms of we actually got to this point. But very important is the fact that many persons, they look on, for example, if they pull up your profile, they see all these wonderful things, the various job roles that you have had over the years, and persons might be saying, whoa, this guy is quite brilliant, he has achieved a lot. How can I reach to that level of achievement? What can I do? So one of the things I really want is for you to kind of look at those job roles that you have actually gone through, how it is that you have actually arrived or moved to each of those stages in terms of how it is that the opportunities were created, or how did you actually create those opportunities to take you along those paths?
I can really distill it down into 2 or 3 concepts. The first 2 are kind of related, and that's kind of the interaction between boredom and curiosity. I would take on a new job. I would master it relatively quickly, especially in the early days of my career where they were not, how shall I say, not the most challenging jobs in the world, right? There were things, especially at the junior and entry level, for someone that is naturally technical and naturally analytical like I am. I've always had a very good problem solving capability. That's just it just came naturally to me. Identifying and understanding the problem and figuring out alternate approaches when the standard approaches don't work, right? But that, along with the technical learning along the way, allowed me to establish myself quickly. Along with that, I kind of ignored conventional wisdom about longevity on the job. I realized very early in my career that the expectations societally that we have for what it's like to be a good employee are things that have really been defined by employers in their pursuit to manage labor pools and to some degree control their employees, right? I think most people, especially in today's climate, with the massive layoffs of tech workers that have been on the job for decades and then they're being let go. The whole concept of employer loyalty really doesn't exist, right? And so, should the concept of employee loyalty exist? I see employment as this kind of bidirectional two-way social contract that you have with your employer, where they have certain obligations and you have certain obligations, right? But staying in a job that is not fulfilling you, either through monetary reasons or learning or whatever is motivating you to be on the job, if you're not getting it from the job anymore, it's probably time to move on, right? And so I made a lot of moves quickly early in my career because for me at that point in time, it was about learning, right? I mean, sure, moving and getting more salary was nice, but for me, it was about challenging myself and growing and learning. And even if you kind of fast forward a few years to about 2011, when I started the OWASP chapter, I wasn't an AppSec guy, right? It was about starting the OWASP chapter was about challenging myself. It was about getting frustrated with my interactions with my dev team at the time. I would ask them to resolve security problems, and they would come back with this laundry list of reasons of why they couldn't do it, right? I don't have a testing environment or whatever the issue is, right? And they would tell me why they couldn't implement security inside the organization. I was getting really frustrated. I'm like, I don't have the ammunition to have this conversation. I need to learn more, right? And I've always been this kind of person where rather than shying away from a challenge, I tend to tackle it head on. I said, well, there is no AppSec community here. And I was in Orlando, Florida at the time. So let's start an OWASP chapter. Let me just immerse myself in this application security space as deeply as I can and learn as much as I can. It was probably one of the best moves that I made in my career, because that was one of, as someone that came up traditionally as a server and network person, and I had some development background. I'd had jobs as a software developer before, but not really from a software security standpoint, right? So that wound up being a very, very good move for me. But all of this has resulted, this incessant curiosity and tackling new challenges has led me to be a consummate generalist, right? I've touched just about everything that you can touch in the arena of technology, from IT to operational technologies, development, architecture, management. I've had a number of management and executive roles over the years, but it's been all about continuing to challenge myself, identifying the gaps in where I'm at and whatever current challenges I'm having, and then chasing that challenge to identify new opportunities. I mean, it's really that simple.
Sure, awesome, definitely. And that's also one of the things that I always try to share with persons who are trying to get into this space. is that in order to be very efficient or effective, be a person of value, then you have to take that time to have that 360-degree view, that holistic approach to information security. And it's always good to learn much about, a little about much, or as they would say, have that broad understanding. And I mean, it's impossible to learn everything, but when you are able to look at it from that perspective, then you're able to apply yourself more efficiently as a cybersecurity professional. So can you share with us in terms of your learning path? What was the challenge? I mean, what were those challenges that you had to face in terms of, I mean, acquisition of knowledge, investing in terms of keeping up with the changing technology? Because that is one of the challenges that many persons have in terms of where do I start, what do I learn, how do I keep up with this dynamic environment as it is?
So I'll give you an answer, but I'll qualify this by saying I don't know that I have been terribly successful in maintaining currency and all the knowledge since I've become such a generalist. And I tend to kind of re-specialize every 3 to 5 years. My career path has been pretty much focused on this one area. I don't try to do everything, right? And I think that's one of the challenges people have when they get into this field is they think they need to understand, forensics and reverse engineering and compliance and all the things, right? Like it's too much for one person to take on everything all at once. But I kind of, if you follow my career trajectory, it's pretty much desktops and a little bit of network and then server and then back to network and diving into app and even within specific security disciplines. Like I spent a number of years, probably in around 2010 to 2014, diving very, very deep into web application firewalls, right? WAF exploitation. I took on the WAFIC, Web Application Firewall Evaluation Criteria Project, which is an OWASP and WASC, which WASC is not really around anymore, but it was another sister AppSec organization that sponsored a lot of these projects. But like as I was full bore on WAF for 3 or 4 years, I wrote some tools. I did a bunch of really awesome stuff. I haven't done much with WAF in the last 8 to 10 years. I moved on to other things, right? Like I felt like I achieved a certain level. I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. And then I hate to say it, but I got bored. And I moved on to something else. Kind of going back to my previous answer, I get to a certain point, I get bored, I want new challenges, and so I move on. But I would say one of the biggest challenges I had to learning, at least from a standpoint of commercial education, really came down to cost, right? Like training is expensive. I think we're in a much better shape today than we were a decade ago as far as the accessibility and availability of really good cybersecurity training content, either through wikis or YouTube videos, or even like your Udemy style classes are not very expensive, and they're maybe not great for advanced content, but they're great for introductory and even some intermediate level content. So the accessibility of that information is a lot better now than it was before. But I wound up doing a lot of community support related things. I was very active at Ethical HackerNet back in the day, and I won a couple of contests, and I got some free trainings through Ethical HackerNet just from being an active forum participant. Did work study with SANS. SANS has always played a really core part of my cybersecurity training, going back to about 2003 when I took my first SANS course. So I guess 20 years now. I've been involved with SANS, and my employer paid for my first course, thankfully. SANS was a lot cheaper back then, but it was still expensive, right? And I wanted more, but my employer wouldn't pay for it and I couldn't afford it. So I started doing work study with the SANS organization, and I probably did, 10 or 12 conferences via work study and got a bunch of certifications and training that way. But a lot of this is just, I feel like I feel like it requires a certain amount of hustle from people. I think candidates that are a little passive in their cybersecurity education are going to struggle to achieve the outcomes they're looking for, right? You kind of need to follow non-traditional paths. Again, I think it's better now, but back then you really had to follow non-traditional paths to achieve your objectives, especially if you didn't have an employer that was ready to, foot the bill. So, I would volunteer at conferences through ISSA and ISACA and OWASP as a chapter leader with OWASP. I got access to discounted or in some instances free training. But it was really about putting myself out there and seeing what the opportunities were. I mean, it really requires you come out of your shell a little bit. You got to engage your social muscles a little bit. And I think that's sometimes some of us, especially the hardcore engineers, are maybe not great at. Just, leave your house, go to a local meetup, talk to people, see what kind of opportunities are out there. And it's not only effective from a training standpoint, but from a job opportunity identification standpoint. As I kind of look back over the last 20 years, I don't think that I have submitted a job application in 2 decades. It's just been people that I know, right? It's through networking and kind of those social interactions that have identified opportunities for training, that have identified opportunities for career growth. And sometimes they don't materialize into anything, and that's okay because I like it. I enjoy it, right?
Spot on. You have actually summed up that I was actually about to ask about. And the reason why I actually asked the question is the fact that I was in a similar position where I was, just about the time of COVID, I was forced out of employment and I was actually trying to learn so much technology. I reached a point where I was actually burnt out in terms of trying to apply for every job, pen testing. I was in cloud, I was in IoT, I was in all of these things. The fun thing about it though is that I learned a lot and I appreciate that experience, the challenges. But very important is the fact that I actually reached out, which I have mentioned, the value in networking, and persons were able to take me and to guide my life and to narrow down my career path to where I'm at now, so that I'm able to focus my skill set to where I want to go. So you have actually touched on a number of valuable points there. Now, what's that one closing, advice that you'd want to share with, just about anyone that might be looking on and want to maybe aspire to be where you are at in terms of your current success?
I would say the one thing that I would leave people with is take risks. Don't be scared. There's kind of a saying in the industry, especially in the consulting space, fake it till you make it. There's obviously, don't lie, right? Don't be dishonest as you're trying to go seek employment. But kind of the dirty secret in hiring is, some of these job profiles that get put out there, employers are almost never expecting to see candidates that meet every single last criteria on the job posting, right? There may be some things that they list as absolutely required for the job, but there's an awful lot of nice to haves, right? And if your intersection with the requirements is there, but you don't meet all the nice to haves, who cares, right? Go put in for it anyway. And I found, especially, and consulting is one of the things that helped me the most here. Once I got a job in consulting, I found that every week I was working on a different project, doing something that I had no clue about. I didn't know the first thing about it. I was learning about it in the hotel room the night before, popping open vendor documentation on a product I'd never seen before. Even to the point where I had to do things like give instructional guidance to a customer on a SIM platform that I had never seen before. I still had never seen the interface when I showed up, right? It was kind of like, okay, let's log in using the customer's account, and kind of like, okay, here's the page. I just read about this last night in the documentation, right? But you have to be okay with a certain level of discomfort, and you kind of have to embrace it, right? If you want a job where you know how to do everything on day one, and you're not intending to grow, and you just want that kind of comfort level, cybersecurity probably is not the career path for you, right? Because this job is all about new challenges every day. And it's all about, how can I quickly identify the problem? How can I quickly identify resources that can help me answer the questions that I need to answer, and very quickly come to a workable solution and figure out how to implement it. And oh, by the way, maintain confidence with all my stakeholders. Whether you're a consultant or whether you're an internal person, you always have stakeholders. And it really comes down to bringing some value to the table, and working with the people that you need to execute on the job. But if you're not comfortable with taking risks, right, and I don't mean unreasonable risks, I mean reasonable risks. If you're not comfortable with challenging yourself and learning something new, you're going to have a hard road ahead of you.
Sure. What great point to end this awesome conversation on. So, Tony, it was indeed a wonderful conversation, and I really enjoyed the value that you added to this conversation.
Thank you very much. I appreciate coming on the show, and there's a good format, and I think a very important topic. We have a lot of people that are trying to break into the industry, try to understand, how they can do it. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. So, great podcast. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so very much. So everyone, until then, stay tuned, stay connected for all future recordings on the CyberJA show with me, your host, Richie Perry.